Welcome back to One Piece Explained. The final chapter of 2023 is upon us, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down how Kuma may get his consciousness back, all of the insane details between this flashback and the original chapters that were referenced, even a potential instance of the One Piece live action series becoming canon, and a whole bunch more. And I want to get right into it, but real quick, over 90% of the people who watch my channel are not subscribed. So if you've enjoyed any of my videos, such as the in-depth live action breakdowns or the weekly manga breakdowns, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps to support me and grow the channel, and you'll also be able to get my videos as soon as they come out. With all that said, let's get into chapter 1102, Kuma's life. We pick back up with Bonney on her quest to find her father as she goes from town to town. She's in her pre-time skip outfit by this point, and we see more of her crew in the back. To the left is of course Gyogyo, who we've seen throughout this flashback, as well as one of their other friends in the back who may either be Tots or Potato, as they were mentioned last week. Behind her is a man with a headband and a rabbit shirt and tattoo, and another man with a headband as well. We saw both of these men upon Bonney's introduction back on Sabaody. There, we saw another crewmate with a hat and mustache in the back who we see later in this chapter off to the side. We had gotten a better look at him just before Bonney left Sabaody. With that, every member of Bonney's crew who was in her introductory panel has now appeared in this flashback. The Marines are of course after them, having been told that the crew has been attacking children and the elderly in the towns that they travel to. We as readers know that the crew is a high priority since the government needs to keep Bonney hostage as part of their deal with Kuma, but this here seems to be the reason that has been played up for the Marines. It's also great that from the Marines' perspective, the crew is a menace because it looks like they're beating up old people and children, when we know that this is just the result of Bonney's age fruit, and these Marines learn about this the hard way. Kuma sees Bonney and the crew from afar, not unlike Dragon keeping tabs on Luffy as we learned in the previous chapter. We get explicit confirmation that Bonney has not only been looking for her father, but Nika as well. And despite wondering what was going on with Luffy when his hair turns all white in his bounty poster, Bonney has conveniently been written out whenever Luffy has used Gear 5th on Egghead. So her eventually seeing Nika's powers on display is going to be a huge moment for her. Also of note, by this point, Gyogyo's fishing boat has officially become the Bonney Pirates Jewelry Margarita with its design in full and Jolly Roger. We learned that all of this was going on around the time that Luffy received his first bounty. We get a continuation of the scene from chapter 96 with Luffy happy as can be over being a wanted man. Usopp has taken the poster from Luffy, continuing to cheer over his inclusion in the back of it. Meanwhile, Nami holds her head in her hand, expressing the severity of what having a bounty actually means. Oda even replicated Sanji brooding off in the corner with his cigarette. This chapter is full of little details like this, with Oda recreating some iconic scenes from throughout the Straw Hat's journey, and he's been known to never reuse a panel, instead opting to draw it again. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see the evolution of his art style over the years. We go around the world to see various reactions to Luffy's first bounty, and we stop at Baltico, the former base of the Revolutionary Army, and see Dragon before he heads off to Loguetown. We never really knew why Dragon was in Loguetown on that fateful day, but considering what we learned in the previous chapter about Dragon looking over Luffy from afar, it seems he may have wanted to ensure Luffy's safe passage into the Grand Line, knowing his son may have to encounter someone like Smoker, who has never let a pirate make it out of town. I should note that Baltico is somewhere in the Grand Line, so Dragon getting to Loguetown so fast is quite remarkable. I wonder if this has anything to do with any potential devil fruit powers. There's always been a lot of speculation on what his true powers are, and I'd love to see what you think in the comments. Speaking of Smoker, we see him grimacing while looking at a piece of paper. Now, considering that this is part of a montage where characters are reacting to Luffy's bounty, one would think that he is also looking at Luffy's bounty poster here. But, as far as we know, Smoker was not aware of who Luffy even was until Buggy and Luffy's altercation on the execution platform in Loguetown. So, this could just be some other piece of paper that he's holding here, but it does make me wonder if Oda's taking a page out of the live-action canon. Spoilers for the end of Season 1's final episode incoming. Now, the very last scene of the finale shows Smoker looking at Luffy's bounty, teasing his appearance in Season 2. For more on that scene, or if you're interested in the live action in general, you might enjoy my breakdown of the series. There'll be a link in the description where you can find all my videos. We also check in on Ace, showing off Luffy's bounty poster to Jinbei. Now, Ace is a very proud brother, as we had seen him also share Luffy's initial bounty with Whitebeard. Jinbei is shocked to hear this news. When Luffy and Jinbei first met during their jailbreak from Impel Down, Jinbei struggled to admit that it was his fault that Arlong was running amok in the East Blue, but he would finally be able to express his gratitude in full after the time skip. Now back over with the Bonney Pirates, we get Bonney laying down the rules for piracy, which in essence mirrors a lot of how the Straw Hat Pirates operate. We also see the origin of Bonnie's cheek piercing, so Kuma would recognize her after she's been cured. Not only that, all of her efforts in becoming a great pirate were just so Kuma could acknowledge her. This is too sweet. Over on Egghead, we see the original prototypes of the Pacifista in these large pods. Now, we've seen similar devices for other clones throughout the series as well, such as with Germa 66 soldiers, the Seraphim, and the Mark III Pacifista. This looks to be taking place soon after the Straw Hats declared war on the world government on Enia's lobby. Vegapunk is taken aback that this was done by none other than Dragon's son, but more so that Dragon even had a son to begin with. Kuma has reasoned that he can divulge this information to Vegapunk since he will be looking through his memories anyway, but notice that they are depicted having this exchange via thought bubbles to indicate that they're whispering. Recall that Saturn had the lab bugged around 2 years prior when Vegapunk first started using the space, so they may be trying to avoid this information being shared with them. However, the world government would know about Luffy being Dragon's son by the time of the Marineford War, as both Akainu and Sengoku were privy to this information, Akainu even knowing about this before Sengoku made it public via transponder snail during the war. So it would appear that the world government got their hands on this information because of Kuma. An admiral like Akainu being aware of this makes sense as well, since he seemed to also be privy to the details of Kuma's deal with the world government. Kuma begins to connect the dots here, suggesting that Luffy bears a lot of similarities to Nika, and if the world government had combed through Kuma's memories, that they may have made this connection themselves, but that's something we'll have to get into another time. Also of note, while the Labo phase in Punk Records has been set up by now, it seems that the climate AC is still not in effect, as we can see the snowy climate. Though this may just be from seeing the island at a distance, since we know the surrounding waters of the island are still in the winter climate. The Frontier Dome looks to be at 65 or 66%, and we don't see any satellites in this chapter, which suggests to me that they are a much more recent invention as I had speculated in previous breakdowns. Considering how Robin, Bonney, and even a CP0 agent like Lucci were not familiar with the satellites, it seems more likely that they may have been an invention during the time skip at the least. We move forward in time toward the end of the Thriller Bark arc, and we get several key panels recreated for this flashback. Kuma offers to spare the Straw Hats if they hand over Luffy, to which the Straw Hats easily decline. The panel here is an amalgamation of the two panels originally depicting this event, putting all of the Straw Hats in one single frame. Kuma expresses his mild disappointment, and we get a new rendition of his iconic Ursa shock. We skip ahead just a bit to after Kuma and Zoro's clash, and get a recreation of Zoro declaring his loyalty to Luffy and his dream. Moving ahead just a bit, Kuma pushes out all of Luffy's pain and suffering for Zoro, as we learn Kuma thinks this to be quite a lot even for someone like himself. And of course, we get a rendition of the classic Nothing at All scene from Zoro, so iconic that it doesn't even need the actual line on the page this time around. The Thriller Bark segment of this flashback closes out with Kuma praising Luffy and the Straw Hats in the aftermath, though this time, Kuma is shown from a different perspective. In the original panel, we would see Kuma from his profile, shaded, giving us a cold and closed-off feel for his character, but now, within this flashback, we have a literal whole new side to Kuma, as he's depicted showing his full face, unshaded, evoking a more personal connection and putting the true face to these words. We skip ahead again to the Sabaody Archipelago arc, as Kuma gets his summons for participating in the war against Whitebeard. We had seen this back then done in person with Vice Admiral Manga requesting Boa Hancock's presence, but here it seems Kuma is being asked by a transponder snail, by who appears to be Sengoku, as evidenced by the snail's mustache. It's interesting to see Kuma learn this information here, as he had previously been aware of Ace's connection to Luffy during the Thriller Bark arc. Anyways, Kuma agrees to go to Marineford before the execution, as we would see him with the other warlords later on. Over on the archipelago, we get a close-up of Bonney simultaneously eating a shank of meat and a slice of pizza, just like she was upon her introduction, though this time we see Kuma is once again checking in on her from afar. There's some crazy attention to detail here from Oda, as the couple that's terrified at seeing Kuma in the window is actually the same couple that expressed amazement at Bonnie's eating back during her initial appearance. Not only that, the outside of the restaurant looks to be the same as the building where Bonney saved Charlos from Zoro. We continue as Kuma notices exclamations from the human auctioning house, where we get a panned out view of this panel from chapter 503, right after Luffy attacked Charlos. The dialogue is pretty much the same, and you can even make out Jean Bart waiting outside. Kuma goes to check out the commotion and is shocked to learn that it's none other than the Straw Hat Pirates. The perspective of the interior of the human auctioning house looks to be just before Rayleigh and Stanson entered the stage, as Kami's fishbowl has already been cut by Zoro. Kuma is bewildered by what he sees, Luffy having attacked the Celestial Dragon to protect the fishmen. Some of these close-ups of the Straw Hats here feature recreations of panels from the Sabaody arc, with Zoro sheathing his sword, Sanji just after lighting a cigarette, Hachi in disbelief, Robin and Brook fighting their way through the guards, and most importantly, Usopp falling on Saint Roswar's head. Also a little detail, while Frankie is shown without his glasses in chapter 503, he actually has them throughout this arc, and Oda made sure to include them here in this flashback. We move ahead and once again get another perspective of a previous panel, this time the one where Kuma arrives during the Straw Hats fight against the Pacifista. Previously, we had gotten Kuma's arrival from PX1's perspective, but here we get the arrival from Kuma's perspective as we look on from behind him, playing into the whole idea that this flashback is giving us Kuma's point of view. You can make out Usopp falling back with Brook and Sanji already on the ground and an injured Zoro up front. I love that this scene showed up in this flashback because it lets me bring up something that I've had in the back of my mind for a while now. Earlier in the Egghead arc, we learned about the Pacifista's authority hierarchy and how a given command cannot be overridden by someone who is on the same or lower level. Well, back then on Sabaody, Kuma ordered PX1 to wait, and it complied, even if only until after Kuma sent Zoro flying. So I don't know if there's necessarily something here, but could Kuma actually have some sort of innate authority over the Pacifista that we didn't realize? If this pans out, this could be a really cool plot point. Now the scene continues as Kuma expresses how he's entrusting the future to Luffy and Bonney. The sequence of panels in the original chapter with Luffy exclaiming he couldn't save his crewmates and seeing Kuma, Sentomaru, Kizaru, and Rayleigh could have originally been read from Luffy's perspective, but now that it's from Kuma's point of view, Kuma's panel has been replaced with Luffy. And although this is what we all figured by this point, we get an explicit confirmation that Kuma sent the Straw Hats to their time skip locations to show them how much stronger they needed to be in the new world. I love how this final panel mirrors the original. Instead of an omniscient narrator telling us the Straw Hats were eradicated, it's Kuma taking that narrator's place and giving us what Kuma believes to be the objective truth. This chapter is perhaps one of my favorite chapters in the whole series because of all these little nuances and details. It's truly incredible work by Oda. We move forward in time and are back on Egghead. It seems the island AC is fully operational by this point, with no snow in sight, and the Frontier Dome is at what looks to be 66%. We learn that Saturn has instructed Vegapunk to program a self-destruct sequence into Kuma. Vegapunk of course contests this, but Saturn reminds Vegapunk that it was his idea in the first place to make Kuma into a weapon. Kuma having a self-destruct mechanism throws a new wrench into things. Of course, there's the idea that he could be used against Saturn in the climax of the arc, having it literally blow up in his face and backfire. While I question how effective it would be in actually taking out Saturn, who can completely heal himself, not only that, just remove the wound completely, I do think this is a big death flag for Kuma if he didn't have one already. But we'll just have to see what comes of this. Vegapunk tries to install his new invention that would allow Kuma to maintain part of his consciousness. Now the exchange between Saturn and Vegapunk here seems to be the same exchange that Bonney was thinking of when she went to attack Saturn before the flashback, with Saturn ordering Vegapunk to remove Kuma's will entirely. This opens up a whole new can of worms with whether Vegapunk actually installed this new technology or not, and I'll talk more about this in a bit. It's interesting to me that Saturn seems to have some greater scientific background, more than just being this godhead of science and defense. It's unknown if he's truly a scientist, or just someone who has a general interest in science and technology. Kuma seems to have overheard this exchange thanks to a superhuman hearing, something that we didn't know about previously. This is another somewhat big revelation that raises more questions, such as how much can he actually hear? Could he have started off on his journey because of something he heard on Egghead? Just when we're getting all of these answers, in classic Oda fashion, we get just as many, if not more, questions to replace them. We learned that this is the day that Kuma would lose his will completely, a day that was previously stated by Doflamingo as being just a few days before the Marineford War. We get the explicit explanation for why Kuma asked Vegapunk to program the order to protect the Thousand Sunny until someone came back, something that we learned from Frankie soon after the time skip. We would learn in Kuma's Vire card that he was enslaved for defying the world government and helping out Luffy with his very act of defiance. It seems that by this point, Kuma fully believes in Luffy's ability to change the world, given everything he's seen from him over the course of the past few years. Kuma's unwavering faith in Luffy here may explain why Vegapunk was not even slightly hesitant to ask Luffy for help with saving him from the world government. We finally get the scene of Kuma pushing out his own memories that Vegapunk had asked about a little while prior, as Kuma explains that this bubble is just a copy of his memories, but like I had speculated in previous breakdowns, it will dissipate should someone make contact with it. Vegapunk seems to have been able to view the memories without touching it, but of course, we know Bonney would look into it in the present day. Even in his final moments, the selfless Kuma can't help but feel some guilt for all the trouble he thinks he's brought onto others, even though it's him who's the one who faced such a difficult life. We get this montage of him thinking back on his friends and family while running throughout his life, from his days as a slave, to him as a pastor in his teen years, to his time as a revolutionary, and finally, his recent years as a pirate. This sequence is already quite emotional, but it hits even harder when you consider his most recent instance of running, with him running as a mindless cyborg toward a yet undisclosed location. As Vegapunk struggles to pull the lever, we get this sequence of everyone on the island who Kuma has met, paying their respects and praying for him, and I love how Vegapunk's silhouette of finally pulling the lever down and breaking into tears looks a lot like him clasping his hands together and praying on his knees. Even these people of science can't help but show some sort of greater respect for the living saint that is Kuma. Kuma's final words are him expressing gratitude for Vegapunk and asking him to wish Bonney a happy 10th birthday on his behalf, as the light in his eyes are replaced by synthetic ones, and we transition to Bonney having just taken in Kuma's memories, completely distraught over what she just learned. There is a lot to unpack here, so let's just start with the question of Kuma's memories being around or not. There was the aforementioned technology that Vegapunk wanted to test, but personally, I feel like he didn't end up doing so, since Saturn suggests that he'll be able to know if he's been deceived, as well as with how distraught Vegapunk was when he goes to pull the lever. Throughout this arc, we've all wondered if there was something that could restore Kuma's memories. The bubble in the paw room comes to mind, as we had previously learned that these would return to the original owner after some time if left untouched, but Bonney took them in, and now they're gone forever. I think the point of doing this, as well as introducing the possibility of saving Kuma's consciousness via Vegapunk's invention, but Saturn ordering against it, was to drive home the idea that Kuma's memories and will are actually gone and cannot be restored through some external means. It would feel somewhat cheap if after all of this, we learned that Vegapunk was just lying to Saturn and to us as readers as he backed up Kuma's memory somewhere else. That said, there is one recurring theme throughout the Egghead arc that could work to explain any potential restoration of Kuma's consciousness or will. At the very start of the arc, Lilith mentions how it's seemingly impossible to control the urges of living creatures, but chalks it up to a programming error. And a few chapters later, Pythagoras studies the battle data from S-Shark's fight and realizes that bloodline elements may record an individual's experiences. We saw this in practice later on in the arc when S-Snake agreed to free the Straw Hats based on Hancock's affection for Luffy. With all of this, it seems possible that even though Kuma's mind has been wiped and his will is gone, he still holds innate urges or experiences that are encoded into his bloodline elements, his very DNA. Things that define who he is, such as his love for Bonney or his selfless nature. Kuma has long wondered what it is that makes his blood so special, when in actuality it's not the blood that makes him different, but rather him that makes the blood. So we've gone through the entirety of Kuma's life up to the point of him losing consciousness, but his flashback still isn't over. The chapter ends with Bonney having just taken in all of Kuma's memories, but it's not in the present day with her being held up by Saturn and surrounded by Marines. I can't help but wonder if we're not done with this flashback. Remember, while this flashback is about Kuma, it's also about Bonney, and we still don't know why she changed her demeanor overnight, since as far as we know, she spent the night crying. I think we may be in for another chapter or two of this flashback, but now continuing through the time on Egghead that we skipped over in the earlier part of this arc. You'll recall that we had cut away from Egghead in chapter 1079 back in March of 2023, and then focused on characters around the world before taking a break between chapter 1088 in July and chapter 1089 in August, when we returned to Egghead to see our heroes having seemingly gained the upper hand in the situation. While this was a great surprise for us as readers who had waited almost half a year to see our crew once again, it was an unprecedented move by Oda to off-screen so much of the activities of our main characters during an ongoing arc. On one hand, it really worked to drive home how far our crew has come in terms of being able to take a bad situation and flip it on its head, but on the other, it was a bit disappointing to not see all the crazy things that could have happened overnight. Back then, I expected us to eventually come back and fill us in on some of the events, but the story just kinda kept going. So with where we are right now, I think it is possible that we get a quick recap of the night before. There were a ton of ongoing questions at the time, so if you're interested in refreshing yourself on where the fandom's head was at during that period, you might find my Egghead recap video useful, as it was intended to discuss all of the ongoing plot threads and questions we had right before we returned with 1089. Real quick, before I wrap this video up, I'm still interested in what Vegapunk had wanted to give to Bonney, now more so than ever. Kuma's final words were to wish Bonney a happy birthday, so my head goes to some sort of 10th birthday gift, and I wonder if this gift was what cheered her up from the night of crying. Maybe she got something that informed her of Kuma potentially regaining his will. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. If you're watching this around the time it came out, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. If you've enjoyed this breakdown, the greatest gift I could ask for is showing your support by subscribing to my channel and or leaving a like or a comment. I can't express enough how grateful I am for this community and to everyone who's shown so much support over the past half year since I started uploading. I love reading everyone's comments on each new video, so let me know what you thought about this chapter. It truly makes my day to see what everyone thinks. I have a lot of big plans for 2024 that I can't wait to get into. So if you're still around, thank you once again, happy holidays, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next one.